My own sister adopted my child behind my back, and she wasn't even sorry. She smiled in court like it was some kind of reunion, while I sat there gripping the edge of the bench so hard my knuckles turned white. If you had asked me 5 years ago if I trusted her, I would have said without hesitation. Yes, I would have told you she was the one person who stuck by me when everyone else turned away. But that day, sitting across from her in a cold courtroom while she held my child's hand like he was hers, I realized I didn't know her at all. It's hard to explain the kind of betrayal that doesn't come from a stranger, but from someone who knew everything. She was there when I found out I was pregnant. She was there when I sat on the bathroom floor, shaking, holding that positive test like it had ruined my life. She didn't judge me, at least. That's what I thought. She made tea, sat next to me, held my hand, and told me everything was going to be okay. That was the first lie. The first of many. And I was too naive, too tired, and too desperate to see any of them coming. Back then, I was 23, working 2 jobs just to afford rent on a 1-bedroom apartment with a leaky ceiling and broken heat. The baby's father ghosted me the second I told him. I didn't have parents to turn to. They passed away years ago. And my friends were either busy building their own lives or slowly distancing themselves from the chaos that came with mine. My sister Olivia was the only one left. She had a good job, a big house in the suburbs, and a husband who treated her like glass. The perfect couple, the golden family. It always felt like she lived in a different world than me, but I never resented her for it. If anything, I admired her. I thought she was what stability looked like. I thought maybe if I followed her lead, I could have a life like that too. Turns out she was watching my breakdown like it was an opportunity when I told her I wasn't. Sure, if I could keep the baby. She didn't scream or scold or act shocked. She said something that felt like love at the time. Whatever you decide, I'm here. She offered to help with doctor appointments. She helped me fill out paperwork for Medicaid. She even offered to let me stay in her guest room once the baby came, just until I could get on my feet. It was too good to be true. And now I know it really was. The first red flag I missed: she insisted on being in every meeting with the social worker. Every conversation about parental rights, guardianship, foster alternative, she was there. Always, just in case I needed help making sense of it. Back then, I thought she was being protective. Now I know she was gathering ammo. I didn't realize it until much later, but she was already laying the groundwork. She started gently, suggesting I might not be ready for motherhood, that maybe it would be selfish to bring a child into my unstable life. She said it like she was trying to protect me from judgment, but really, she was planting seeds of doubts, so that when the time came, I'd already feel like giving him up was the right thing to do. I didn't sign any adoption papers. Let me make that crystal clear. I never consented. I never agreed to anything. But when I finally gave birth to my son, Nathaniel, Olivia was right there, holding my hand, taking pictures, smiling like it was her child being born. And when I came home from the hospital, exhausted and terrified, I let her take care of things. I thought I was just borrowing time to rest. I didn't know she was finalizing her plan behind my back. What happened next felt like a blur. One morning I woke up and she was gone. So was Nathaniel. Her guest room was empty. Her car gone. Her phone switched off. I panicked. I called everyone I knew. No one had seen her. I even called the police, and at first they acted like I was being dramatic. Are you sure she didn't tell you she was taking the baby for a few days? No, she didn't. But Olivia was smart. She had anticipated this too. She left a typed-up letter with a lawyer's office. The letter claimed I had given her temporary guardianship and that I was unfit and emotionally unstable. She filed for emergency custody without telling me. Claimed she was doing it for the safety of the child, and because she had resources, legal support, and a stable home. They believed her. For 3 whole months, I didn't know where my son was. I wasn't allowed to see him. My calls were blocked. My emails bounced back. I thought I was going crazy. I was already dealing with postpartum depression, and now I was facing something that felt worse than death, being erased from my own child's life. When I finally got a court date, I thought I'd have a chance to explain everything, that the judge would see through her lies. But when I walked into that courtroom and saw Nathaniel sitting next to her, dressed like he was going to Sunday school, gripping her hand like it was normal, my heart broke in ways I didn't know were possible. She looked up at me like she had already won. She didn't even flinch. And in that moment, I realized Olivia never loved me. She pitied me. And when she saw that I was drowning, she didn't throw me a rope. She took what she could from the wreckage and left me to sink. But I wasn't going to drown. Not yet. Because what Olivia didn't know was that I had proof. Receipts, voicemails, a paper trail of manipulation, and I was ready to bring it all to court. And what happened next would change everything. The truth is, I never wanted to give Nathaniel up. Never. not even for a second. But back then, when I first found out I was pregnant, I was barely surviving myself. I had just lost my job at the diner. My bank account was in the double digits, and the landlord had taped yet another warning to my front door. I was living off cereal and tap water, crying myself to sleep in a room that never got warm no matter how high I turned up the heat. So when those two lines appeared on that cheap plastic test, I didn't feel joy or excitement. I felt fear. Raw, unfiltered fear. I wasn't ready to raise a child, not when I could barely raise myself. Olivia was the first person I called. She picked up on the first ring like she was waiting for me. Her voice was calm, soothing, the way you'd speak to someone standing on the edge of a ledge. "It's okay," she said. "We'll figure it out. You're not alone." That's what she always said, and I clung to those words like a lifeline. I thought she meant them. From the beginning, she positioned herself as my savior. She insisted I move into her home, just until the baby comes, she said. It was a quiet neighborhood with clean streets and tall trees lining the sidewalks. Her house smelled like vanilla and fresh linen, nothing like the stale mildew in my crumbling apartment. For the first time in months, I could sleep without a coat on. I thought maybe this was a sign that life was turning around, Olivia told me not to worry about groceries, rent, or anything else. "Focus on the baby," she said. "Just get through the pregnancy." I trusted her. That was my second mistake. She came with me to every prenatal appointment. She memorized the schedule, set reminders on her phone, and made sure I took my vitamins. At the time, I saw her as the perfect big sister, someone who was doing all the things a real family was supposed to do. But now, looking back, I see what I didn't want to admit. She was playing a role, carefully crafting her image to everyone around us. She introduced me to her neighbors as my sister, the brave mama-to-be. But I noticed how she always emphasized how young I was, how unstable. "She's going through a tough time, but she's trying," she'd say with a tight smile, as if preparing them for the story she was already building. As the months passed, I started to feel stronger. I was eating better, sleeping more. I even started looking for part-time work again, eager to prove that I could be a mother, that I would be. But every time I brought up plans for after the birth childcare options, finding our own place, or what I'd need to do to regain independence, Olivia would subtly shut the conversation down. "You're getting ahead of yourself," she'd say. "Let's focus on one thing at a time. Or worse, don't put pressure on yourself. The baby deserves peace, not chaos." I didn't realize she was planting doubt. That every comforting word came with a twist, like she was tying a ribbon around a loaded gun. One day, I overheard her on the phone. She was talking to someone I never found out who, and she said, "It'll be easier if she thinks it's her decision." I should have questioned it. I should have asked what she meant, but I didn't, because I was tired, and trusting her felt easier than facing the alternative. Then came the baby shower. Olivia planned the entire thing down to the color of the frosting on the cupcakes. Everyone from her world was there, her husband's colleagues, her yoga friends, even her old college roommate who flew in just for the occasion. People I barely knew handed me gifts I hadn't asked for and congratulated me with smiles that didn't reach their eyes. And Olivia, she stood next to me all day, like a proud mother. She gave a speech about how this little boy is already so loved and how our family is growing in the most beautiful way. She never said my son, just ours. I thought it was weird, but I let it slide. I had bigger things to worry about, like how I was going to raise a baby without a job or a place to call my own. Nathaniel was born on a rainy Thursday night. The labor was long and brutal. I screamed until my voice cracked, but the second I heard his first cry, the pain vanished. I looked at him, tiny, red, wrinkled, and I felt something shift. It wasn't fear anymore. It was fire. I had created life. I had survived everything to bring him into the world. And I knew, without a doubt, I was going to fight for him. I didn't have much, but I had love. And I thought maybe that would be enough. For the first few days, Olivia was an angel. She brought me warm food, made sure I slept, held Nathaniel when I needed a break. But little things started to feel off. She wouldn't let me hold him when certain people visited. She corrected me when I called myself mommy in front of her friends. "Let's not confuse him yet," she said once, as if I was a visitor in my own life. A week later, I went for a walk to clear my head. Just 20 minutes around the block. When I came back, the house was silent. The nursery Olivia had decorated was empty. The crib was made, but there was no baby. No Olivia. My heart dropped. I ran through every room, screaming his name, calling hers, panicking. Nothing. She didn't leave a note. She didn't answer her phone. It was like she vanished. That was the day my world cracked open, and I was only beginning to realize just how deep the betrayal went. Because what I didn't know yet, what Olivia had carefully kept hidden, was that while I was healing from childbirth and barely staying afloat, she had filed paperwork not to foster, not to help, but to become Nathaniel's legal mother. And The lies were only just beginning. The first time I saw the adoption papers, my hands went numb. I couldn't process what I was looking at. I had gone to the child welfare office determined to report a kidnapping, to tell anyone that my sister had taken my baby without permission. I walked in there armed with photos of Nathaniel, printouts of our texts, even the hospital discharge papers with my name listed as mother. But the woman behind the glass window didn't look surprised when I explained the situation. She looked cautious, like she already knew something I didn't. She typed my name into the system and asked me to take a seat. I sat there for nearly 30 minutes in that waiting room, heart pounding, while posters about child safety and flu vaccines stared back at me from the walls. When she finally called me back, her tone was clinical, detached. She pulled out a file and placed it on the desk between us. "According to our records," she said, "the child in question has already been legally adopted. Finalized last week." I thought I had misheard her. "Adopted?" I repeated, my voice breaking. "That's impossible. I never signed anything. I never gave him up." She didn't flinch, just slid the folder toward me. "Is this your sister's name?" she asked, pointing to the line marked adoptive parent. I stared at it. There it was. Olivia Bennett, clear as day. And beneath it, in cold black ink, a forged signature that was supposed to be mine. They had my name on that form. My name, in cursive, that looked eerily close to my handwriting, but not quite right. At first glance, it might have fooled anyone. But I knew. My own penmanship. That wasn't mine. I could barely breathe. "This is fake," I said. "I didn't sign this. I never signed this." The worker's brows furrowed. She leaned in slightly, her voice quieting. "Are you saying this was done without your consent?" "Yes," I snapped. "She forged my signature. She stole my child." She pursed her lips, then gently pushed the folder back into her drawer. "If that's true, you'll need to hire a lawyer. This process is finalized. It's not something we can reverse without court intervention." I walked out of that building in a daze. The file's contents burned into my brain. Olivia had planned every step. The guardianship, the move into her house, the sudden disappearance. While I was recovering from childbirth, she had filed fake paperwork behind my back and somehow convinced the system that I was unfit, that I had given up my rights willingly. The deeper I looked into it, the uglier it became. She claimed I was unstable, emotionally erratic, that I had expressed multiple times my inability to care for a child. She even submitted a fake psychological evaluation supposedly written by a licensed therapist. When I tried to find the name of the therapist, it didn't even show up in any registry. It was all lies stacked neatly, professionally, convincingly, and she didn't stop there. She started reaching out to extended family, telling them she had stepped in to protect the child. She painted herself as a selfless savior, sacrificing her peaceful life to raise her poor, troubled sister's baby. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years started messaging me some cruel. "Maybe it's better this way," one wrote. "Nathaniel will have stability now." Another one said, "You always had a hard time keeping things together. Maybe Olivia's doing what you couldn't." I wanted to scream. She wasn't just stealing my child, she was rewriting the entire narrative, making sure that by the time I stood up to fight back, no one would believe me. For weeks, I tried to get a lawyer, but no one wanted to take my case. Too complicated. The adoption's finalized. You'd have to prove fraud, and without hard evidence, that's nearly impossible. I started documenting everything. I gathered texts, voicemails, hospital forms. I contacted the notary whose stamp was on the adoption paperwork. When I finally reached him, he admitted he had never met me, just Olivia. She said her sister was bedridden, he explained, that she had power of attorney. My blood ran cold. Power of attorney. That was another forged document. She had forged everything, and yet, when I confronted her, she acted like I was the crazy one. I showed up at her house, shaking, holding a folder full of evidence. She opened the door with a smug little smile, wearing yoga pants and holding Nathaniel on her hip. "You shouldn't be here," she said calmly, like I was some unwanted visitor. "If you're going to cause a scene, I'll have to call the police." "I never signed those papers," I hissed. "You stole him." She shifted Nathaniel to her other arm. "You gave him to me," she said without missing a beat. "You just don't remember it that way. You forged my signature. You faked a therapist letter. You lied to social services." "I protected him," she snapped. "You were broke. You were depressed. You were spiraling. He needed stability. I gave him that. And now you want to tear him away because your pride is hurt?" I froze. It wasn't just that she had taken him, it was that, deep down, she actually believed she had done the right thing. She didn't see herself as a thief. She saw herself as the hero. That's what made her dangerous. The last thing she said before slamming the door in my face was this: "You'll never win. I'm already his mother in every way that matters." But I wasn't going to let that stand. Not after everything. I didn't care how many people she fooled. I didn't care how long it would take, because I had something she didn't: the truth. And once I got that truth into the courtroom, she was going to find out exactly what kind of mother I was. Olivia didn't just want to keep my child, she wanted to erase me entirely. And the more I pushed back, the harder she worked to make me disappear. She began her campaign quietly at first, slipping poison into conversations with people we both knew. Friends, old coworkers, even casual acquaintances. I could feel the shift before I understood it. People stopped answering my calls. My name stopped showing up on party invites. When I walked into rooms, the air changed. People smiled too tightly or looked away too fast. At first, I chalked it up to paranoia. Maybe I was imagining it. Maybe I was spiraling, like she said. But then screenshots started showing up in my inbox, DMs from people I barely knew, saying, "I think you should see this." She was telling people I had abandoned Nathaniel, that I had left him at her doorstep like an unwanted package, that she had no choice but to take him in after I disappeared. The stories varied depending on who she was talking to. In one version, I was addicted to pills. In another, I had a mental breakdown and ran off in the middle of the night. One particularly dramatic message said I had tried to harm the baby and had to be removed from the house. All lies. Carefully tailored lies that fit into whatever narrative would make her look like the martyr. And somehow, it worked. People believed her. She had the house, the clean social media profile, the smiling family photos. I had a messy apartment, a paper trail of bounced checks, and a growing list of therapists I couldn't afford to keep seeing. The world didn't care who was telling the truth. It only cared about who looked more stable. That's when she took it public out one morning. I woke up to a flood of messages. My name was trending locally on a parenting forum. Someone, clearly Olivia or someone close to her, had posted a long, weepy confession titled, "My sister gave up her baby and now wants him back." It was written like a soap opera, full of half-truths and outright fiction. "I never planned to adopt my nephew," the post said. "But when I saw how my sister was struggling, I couldn't bear to let him suffer. She told me she couldn't do it anymore. She cried and begged me to help. I took her in, gave her everything. And in return, she vanished. And now, a year later, she's back, angry, unstable, and threatening to destroy the only home this child has ever known." The comments were brutal. Thousands of strangers, most of them mothers themselves, dragged me in ways I didn't think strangers could. They called me selfish, a danger to my own child, a disgrace to all women. "You don't get to drop your baby and then change your mind? This poor woman took on your mess and now you want to punish her. Children need stability, not biological drama." Over and over, that word, stability, like it was some magic badge Olivia had earned, and I never could. I wanted to scream. None of them knew what happened. None of them had sat with me in the emergency room while I bled for 19 hours giving birth to a child. I never once considered walking away from. None of them had seen the months I spent planning a life for him, writing in journals about what I'd name him, where I'd take him for his first birthday, how I'd raise him to be kind and brave. But they didn't see that. They only saw a headline, "Unstable Mother versus Selfless Sister," and that was enough. But Olivia made one mistake. She didn't realize how far I was willing to go. I hired a private investigator with the last of my savings, a no-nonsense woman named Denise who'd been in the field for over 20 years. She didn't promise miracles, but she did promise something Olivia never expected: the bonus. Denise started digging into everything. Olivia's emails, her bank records, her conversations with social workers, and slowly, piece by piece, she began uncovering the truth. We found the original email Olivia had sent to the notary. She had attached a scan of a forged medical note claiming I was in a psychiatric facility. She claimed I had been diagnosed with postpartum psychosis and was incapable of giving informed consent. The notary, who had already confessed to never meeting me, stamped the documents anyway. Denise also found an audio recording from a conversation between Olivia and a former friend, where she laughed about how easy it was to get the courts to believe she was the better fit. "All I had to do was cry and say I was worried for the baby," she said. "They didn't even ask to talk to her." The final blow came when Denise tracked down a former social worker Olivia had worked with during the custody process. She had recently retired and was far more candid than I expected. She remembered Olivia. "Something about her rubbed me the wrong way," she said. "She was too rehearsed, knew all the right phrases, and there was something off about the urgency, how she wanted everything rushed." Armed with all of that, I finally had what I needed. I filed a motion to contest the adoption on the grounds of fraud and misrepresentation. The court date was set. I knew it wouldn't be easy, Reversing an adoption is one of the hardest things to do legally, but I also knew that once the judge saw the evidence, she'd have no choice but to listen. When Olivia was served the papers, she didn't respond, she didn't call, she didn't message. But I know she saw them. I know because the next day, she posted a smiling photo of her and Nathaniel on social media with the caption, "Nothing will ever break us apart." That was her warning shot, but I wasn't scared, because for the first time since Nathaniel had been taken from me, I had the truth on my side. And I was done letting her control the narrative. I didn't need the world to believe me. I just needed one courtroom, one judge, one chance to tell my story, and that moment was finally coming. The day of the court hearing arrived, cloaked in gray clouds. Like the sky itself couldn't decide whose side it was on, a mix of fear, adrenaline, and relentless mental rehearsals. I kept picturing Olivia's facemug.com, rehearsed sitting across the courtroom, playing the same role she'd perfected for over a year, the concerned aunt, the devoted guardian, the unwilling heroine who had to step in and save a child from a chaotic, unstable mother. I wasn't sure what scared me more, her lies or the fact that people kept believing them. Denise met me. Outside the courthouse that morning, she was dressed sharply in navy slacks and a pressed blazer, her presence solid and grounding. "You ready?" she asked, voice low, her eyes scanning the entrance like she expected Olivia to pop out of the shadows. "As I'll ever be," I muttered. My palms were clammy, my heart racing. Inside, the waiting area outside the courtroom was filled with murmurs and stale air. I recognized Olivia immediately. She was seated in the corner with her attorney, a clean-cut man in an expensive suit, who looked like he specialized in corporate mergers, not family law. Olivia, of course, was dressed like she'd just stepped out of a church pew. Soft pink blouse, pearl earrings, hair pulled back in a neat twist. She looked calm, serene, practiced. Nathaniel wasn't with her. Thank God, I didn't want him anywhere near this mess. Not until the truth had room to breathe. Her eyes met mine for a brief second, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something beneath the surface. Not fear, not guilt. Something colder, calculated indifference. As if she still believed, even now, that she'd win. That I'd come crawling back. That somehow, despite the evidence, she'd talk her way out of this like she always had. When the judge finally called us in, everything inside me snapped into focus. The courtroom was small, nothing like the grand courtrooms you see on television. No jury, just a judge, 2 attorneys, a clerk, and a handful of observers. But it might as well have been the world. Olivia's lawyer spoke first. He recited her version of events like he was reading bedtime fiction. My client took temporary custody under informal agreement. The child's biological mother, Ms. Landon, expressed an inability to care for the child, fearing for the child's well-being. Ms. Bennett acted as any responsible family member. Would she stepped in? The adoption was filed and finalized through the appropriate legal channels. There was no coercion, no fraud. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense tone, nodded slowly, then turned to my attorney. "And what's your response to that?" My lawyer, a young woman named Lee I had found through a nonprofit legal aid clinic, stood and laid out the foundation we'd built. "Your Honor, the adoption was fraudulent. My client never consented to terminate her. Parental rights? The signature on the documents was forged. We have expert handwriting analysis confirming it. In addition, we have recorded statements, witness testimony, and documentation proving that false. Psychological reports were submitted on behalf of Ms. Bennett in order to manipulate the legal process. Then it was my turn. I took the stand. Heart pounding, voice trembling at first. But once I started, I couldn't stop. I told the story from the beginning. The months of pregnancy, the move into Olivia's house, the supposed support that slowly morphed into control, the moment she disappeared with my baby, the forged documents, the lies. At one point I glanced at the judge and saw something shift in her expression. Not pity, she didn't strike me as the type to coddle anyone, but recognition. As if something about my story made her sit up straighter, pay closer attention. Then Denise took the stand. Calm, composed, deadly precise. She laid out her findings. One by one, the fake doctor's note, the notary's admission, the audio clip where Olivia admitted manipulating the system. Each piece fell into place like a puzzle snapping together. Finally, Olivia was called to the stand. This was the moment I'd been waiting for. She walked up, still poised, still smiling faintly, like this was all beneath her. Her lawyer asked her soft, guiding questions about how she'd taken me in, how she'd tried to help, how the adoption was a last resort. Then it was Lee's turn. "Ms. Bennett, did you at any point obtain written, notarized consent from Ms. Landon for the adoption?" Olivia paused. She gave verbal consent. "Verbal consent is not sufficient for a finalized adoption. Did you obtain legal documented consent? I asked. She wasn't in a place to sign anything, but... So that would be a no, Lee cut in, keeping her tone sharp. Do you recognize this audio recording? She clicked play. Olivia's voice filled the courtroom, laughing about how easy it was to fool the courts. For the first time, Olivia's smile cracked. Her lawyer objected, but it was too late. The damage was done. The judge allowed the recording, noting its relevance. Olivia stammered, tried to backpedal, but the weight of evidence was crashing down like an avalanche. When court adjourned for the day, the judge didn't give a final ruling yet, but her expression said everything. She instructed both parties to return in 2 weeks for a final decision. Outside the courthouse, Olivia didn't speak to me. She rushed past without a word, her lawyer trailing behind, already on the phone. But I wasn't watching her anymore. I was watching the sky. The clouds had finally started to clear. 2 weeks, 14 days of waiting. I thought those final weeks of pregnancy had been long-aching, bloated, anxious. But this was something else entirely. The time between the court hearing and the judge's decision stretched endlessly. Every hour crawling, every notification on my phone making my heart jump. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat much. I paced the apartment floor until the neighbors downstairs started banging on their ceiling with a broom. What made it worse was the silence. Olivia didn't reach out. Not a call, not a message, not even a veiled threat. But I knew her well enough to know that silence didn't mean defeat. It meant strategy. She was regrouping, recalibrating, preparing her next move just in case. The judge ruled against her. She'd always been like that. When backed into a corner, she didn't fight. She calculated. Denise stayed close. She didn't say much, wasn't the comforting type, but her presence grounded me. She checked on me once a day, reminded me to stay offline, and warned me to keep my expectations realistic. Even with the evidence, family courts unpredictable, she'd say, judges do what they believe is in the best interest of the child. Sometimes that means returning the child to the biological mother. Sometimes it means upholding the current arrangement to avoid disrupting the kid's life. We gave the truth, but you need to prepare for either outcome. I nodded every time she said that, but in my heart I couldn't. I had to believe. I needed to, because the alternative, accepting that my son might stay in the arms of the woman who betrayed me, was unbearable. The night before the final ruling, I found myself sitting alone in Nathaniel's old nursery. When Olivia first let me move in, she'd helped me paint the walls a muted sage green. We'd strung up little stars on the ceiling. I used to sit in that very rocking chair reading him stories he couldn't yet understand, imagining the life we'd have. I still remembered the way he smelled like lotion and warmth and soft cotton. I remembered the way he clutched my finger with his entire hand. He was mine. No matter what the court said, I knew he was mine. The next morning, I walked into the courthouse wearing a dress I hadn't worn in over a year. Navy blue, simple, modest. A part of me thought it might help if I looked like the kind of mother judges were comfortable trusting, the kind that didn't miss appointments or forget to pay parking tickets or fall apart in grocery store aisles from panic attacks. Olivia was already there. Again, no Nathaniel. But this time she didn't look quite so composed. Her hair wasn't in its usual neat twist. It hung down her shoulders in loose, frizzy waves. Her expression wasn't calm either. It was tense, like she was finally starting to doubt her grip on the situation. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The judge entered, face unreadable. She flipped through a manila folder with deliberate slowness. Then she spoke. After reviewing all the submitted evidence, including documents, recordings, and witness testimony, the court finds that the adoption of Nathaniel Landon by Olivia Bennett was obtained through fraudulent means, including forged signatures and false medical claims. My breath caught. My heart stopped. Therefore, the court rules in favor of the petitioner, Ms. Naomi Landon. Custody of the child, Nathaniel, will be restored to his biological mother, effective immediately. There was more, something about transitional arrangements, a social worker assigned to facilitate the handover. Standard legal language, but I didn't hear any of it. All I heard was the thundering in my ears, the wild drumbeat of 1,000 emotions crashing at once: disbelief, relief, fury, joy. I turned to Olivia. She was frozen, her mouth slightly open, her hands clenched. For a second, I thought she might leap up and scream, but she didn't. She just sat there completely still, like she'd finally run out of performances outside the courthouse. Denise gave me a single nod and a rare smile. "You did it," she said. And then she disappeared just like that. Her job was done. The reunion with Nathaniel wasn't dramatic. It wasn't even immediate. The court appointed a transition specialist, a soft-spoken woman named Eleanor, who gently reintroduced me into his daily routine over the course of 2 weeks. I was warned he might not recognize me, that he might cry, resist, even scream. But he didn't. The first time I saw him again, he stared at me quietly for a moment. Then he reached out and touched my face, like he was remembering. I held him against my chest and didn't say a word. I didn't have to. My body remembered his tiny heartbeat against mine. My arms found their place like they'd never let go. Olivia didn't fight the transition. She didn't show up. She didn't make any last-ditch appeals. Part of me wanted to believe it was guilt, but deep down I knew better. She just hated losing, and once she realized she couldn't manipulate her way out, she cut her losses and vanished. It took months for things to feel normal again. I had to find a new place, start working again, build a support system that didn't involve people who'd once believed I was the villain. Some friendships never recovered. Others, surprisingly, did. A few women who had once commented hateful things on Olivia's forum post even messaged to apologize, said they felt misled. One of them mailed me a handmade quilt for Nathaniel. I never replied, but I kept the quilt. Nathaniel grew. He started saying mama again. He learned to walk, then run, then climb everything in sight. Every day. I watched him become more himself, and every day I thanked whatever strange twist of fate had given me the strength to fight for him. Sometimes people ask me if I've forgiven Olivia, if I've made peace with what happened. I always give the same answer. I don't need to forgive her. What I need is to live better without her. And I am. Nathaniel is thriving. I'm thriving. And for the first time in a long time, we're finally truly free. The months that followed were quieter, but they were anything but calm. After the court ruling, the chaos didn't stop. It just changed shape. It wasn't about fighting anymore. It was about healing, about adjusting, about figuring out how to rebuild a life that had been gutted, rearranged, and handed back to me with new rules, new rhythms, and a child who had no idea that the world around him had just been turned upside down. Nathaniel was back in my arms. But that didn't mean everything suddenly clicked into place. He was 2 now, and the year he'd spent with Olivia had shaped him in ways I didn't fully understand. He wasn't the baby I'd rocked to sleep every night. He had habits I hadn't taught him, foods he liked that I didn't even recognize. He flinched at loud sounds, and every time I walked out of the room even to use the bathroom, he cried like I was disappearing forever. I guess in his mind I had disappeared once. Maybe he thought I'd do it again. There were nights when I sat in bed, watching him sleep, wondering if he remembered the woman who had taken care of him in my absence. Did he miss her? Did he still expect her to walk through the door? Those thoughts used to gut me, but the truth is, the damage Olivia left behind was my responsibility now. I couldn't erase her from his past, but I could make sure she had no place in his future. I threw myself into motherhood like it was a second chance I couldn't afford to mess up. Every moment felt borrowed, like I had to earn it all over again. I took parenting classes, joined support groups for mothers who had experienced custody, loss, and devoured every book I could find on attachment trauma. Some nights I'd collapse into bed with a headache, only to get up a few hours later to comfort Nathaniel from another nightmare. But I never resented him. Not once, because I knew what it felt like to have someone turn their back on you, and I promised him that I never would. Financially, things weren't easy. My old job didn't hold my position, and starting over wasn't as simple as updating a resume. For a while, I lived off savings and small freelance gigs. Denise connected me with a community organization that helped single mothers find housing and subsidized daycare. I swallowed my pride and accepted every bit of help I could get, because this time I wasn't doing it alone. I had Nathaniel, and that was worth more than any paycheck. The strangest part was the silence that followed Olivia's disappearance. After the court ruling, she didn't just retreat, she vanished. No social media, no gossip, no passive-aggressive emails. At first, I thought it was the calm before another storm. I kept expecting a surprise appeal or a late-night email from one of her lawyer friends, but nothing came. It was as if she had packed up her lies and disappeared into the same shadows she used to hide behind. One day, curiosity got the better of me. I asked Denise if she'd heard anything. Last I checked, she said she sold her house, moved out of state, and let her professional license expire. Looks like she's laying low. Think she'll try anything again? I asked. Denise shook her head. Olivia doesn't come back when she loses. She disappears. She finds a new audience, a new narrative, a new victim. Her words sent a chill through me, but more than fear, I felt something else. Closure. Not because I had forgiven Olivia. I hadn't, and I wasn't sure I ever would. But because for the first time in years, her absence didn't scare me. It relieved me as Nathaniel and I settled into our new life. Small victories began to pile up. His vocabulary exploded. He started stringing words into sentences, asking for hugs, singing songs he learned at daycare. He stopped crying when I left the room. He began calling me Mama without hesitation. The nightmares came less frequently. The tantrums mellowed. Slowly, gently, we were stitching our bond back together. I started posting pictures of our life again. Nothing dramatic, just the little things. Pancakes shaped like dinosaurs. Our first trip to the park, a video of Nathaniel trying to dance in his pajamas, the comments from friends and old coworkers poured in. He's getting so big. Look at that smile. So happy for you. But the one message that stopped me cold came from someone I didn't recognize. It was short. Just 2 lines. I used to work with Olivia. I saw what she did to you. I'm sorry I didn't speak up sooner. I stared at it for a long time. I never responded. But it told me something I'd suspected for a long time, that Olivia's lies had been bigger than me. That she'd manipulated more than just my story. She'd created an entire illusion. And eventually, even that illusion had crumbled. Months passed, I got a new job. Nothing fancy, but stable. I started volunteering at the same organization that had helped me during my lowest point. I met other women like me, women who had been pushed to the edge and clawed their way back. We traded stories, shared resources, and reminded each other that surviving wasn't enough. We deserved to live. One evening while I was making dinner, Nathaniel toddled into the kitchen holding a piece of paper he'd drawn. It was just scribbles, lines looping in chaotic circles, but in the center was a stick figure with long hair holding hands with a smaller one. "Who's this?" I asked. "That's you," he said. "That's me. We're holding hands." I knelt down and pulled him into my arms, pressing my forehead to his. "That's right, baby," I whispered. "We always will be." And in that moment, I didn't care about Olivia or the court, or what people had said about me when they didn't know the truth. All that mattered was the little boy in my arms, the bond we'd reclaimed, and the life we were building together, one honest, hard-won day at a time. It was a rainy Thursday the first time I walked into the therapy office. Not for Nathaniel, already started his sessions a month earlier and was finally warming up to his child counselor, but for myself. For the longest time, I'd told myself I didn't need it. I was functioning, wasn't I? I was working, parenting, cooking, even laughing sometimes. I'd fought through a legal battle most people wouldn't have survived and won back my son. What more did I need? But one night, after Nathaniel had fallen asleep, I'd found myself staring at the ceiling for hours, not crying, not panicking, just hollow. Like something inside me had been permanently scooped out and replaced with silence. The kind of silence that didn't just come from Olivia's absence or the ending of that chapter came from realizing how deeply I had stopped trusting myself, how thoroughly I had questioned my own worth, my ability to make decisions, even my capacity to love. I had been manipulated, lied to, and painted as unstable by someone who once claimed to care for me. And even though I'd proven the truth, a piece of me still felt broken. That was what brought me to the therapist's office. I didn't go there looking to relive the past. I went there to reclaim myself from it. The sessions weren't easy. I had to unlearn the habit of minimizing my own pain. I had to stop brushing off my trauma as just a rough patch or something that could have been worse. I had to face the fact that I had allowed Olivia into my life, not just out of naivety, but because I didn't believe I deserved boundaries, and I had to admit that I stayed quiet too long because deep down, a part of me had already internalized what she wanted me to believe, that I wasn't capable, that I needed saving, that I wasn't enough on my own. But therapy also gave me something I hadn't had in years: clarity. It helped me see that healing wasn't just about letting go of pain, it was about understanding it, owning it, even the ugly parts, especially the ugly parts. Outside of therapy, life moved forward, slowly, but with more color. Nathaniel started preschool. The first day I dropped him off, I hovered by the doorway for too long, watching him take his first steps into a world that wasn't just made of courtrooms and custody battles, a world filled with story time and glitter glue and tiny chairs. He turned back once, waved at me, and smiled, and in that moment I knew we were going to be okay. The teachers adored him. He was shy at first, but slowly opened up his curiosity, blooming in unexpected ways. He was always asking questions about clouds, about why dogs bark, about whether dinosaurs ever wore shoes. His laugh came easier now, and he stopped clinging to me like I might vanish if he blinked. We had our routines: stories, pancake Sundays, and messy art afternoons. Our apartment was filled with scribbled drawings and plastic toys and that warm, familiar chaos that only comes from having a child you fought like hell to keep. And through it all, Olivia remained a ghost. There were moments when I'd still brace myself, expecting a call, a letter, a knock on the door, but nothing came. No appeals, no emails, just silence. I didn't know if she was watching from a distance or if she had truly moved on to someone else's life, someone else's trust to violate, but I stopped wasting time wondering. I stopped letting her live rent-free in my head. Whatever she did next, it wouldn't be my problem. Not anymore. As winter turned to spring, I decided to take a bigger step. I enrolled in an evening class. At a local community college, it wasn't about chasing a new career. It was about remembering that I existed outside of motherhood, outside of trauma, that I was still capable of learning, of growing, of having goals that didn't revolve around survival.